General Cardozo, sir, with your permission.
Yeah, please start, Shifali.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. A very good morning to everyone. Before we begin today's session, I'd just like to assure each and every one of our participants that Cisco WebEx is an extremely safe and secure platform. But if for any reason while the session is live, we feel there are any data encryption or security related issues, we will end the session right away for the safety and security of all our participants. I'd request all of you to please keep your audio on mute. And if you have any questions, there is a chat box on the right-hand side of your screens, and I'd request you all to please put your questions into the chat box. I will now hand over to General Sharma, Director USI, to please begin today's session. Over to you, sir.
General Raj Shukla, PVSM, YSM, SM, ADC, GOC, INC, Hot Track, General Cardozo, General Sandhu, senior officers from the Directorate of Artillery, Commandant Arctic School, and other senior serving officers and retired officers from the Fraternity of Artillery, as also the participants from the council and other participants. A very good morning and welcome to this very interesting session on a very important book which General Sandhu has written under the aegis of USI at the behest of Directorate of Artillery. So this actually book covers 5 epic battles of artillery. And I think it was a very good initiative by DG Artillery, and we are thankful that our USI was incorporated in this. As Napoleon has very correctly said, and the history has proved it, that great battles are won by artillery. And artillery has been, is, and will remain a very important driver in the revolution in military affairs. In the book, General Sandhu has very succinctly covered these 5 epic battles, and he starts with the Battle of Gettysburg, that is the during American Civil Wars. Then he's covered the Battle of Vimy Ridge, which was during Gallipoli campaign, that is in 1917, which saw the Canadian Corps fight as one entity for the first time and commenced with a great artillery barrage. And perhaps we replicated it in some way in the Battle of Tololing and Kargil. Even Russians are known to have the mass artillery fire, which became a very important and battle winning factor in their campaigns. Subsequently, we had this Battle of Bir Hashim, that is .171 during the North African campaign, where creditably 2nd Indian Field Regiment, it did direct they used the guns in the direct firing role with the open sights and knocked down 56 German tanks, and this onslaught was led by none other than Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Then, of course, we have the Battle of Cham, where artillery, it was almost, it fought face to face with the adversary. And subsequently, we have the Battle of Tololing, which led to the grand victory of capture of Tiger Hill. And we were able to convert a tactical defeat into a strategic victory. I will not talk more about this because we have the expert panel. So we welcome you once again for this, and I'm particularly thankful to General Raj Shukla for sparing his valuable time and being with us on this very important occasion. In fact, he's been extremely supportive to the USI and has been helping us with a number of projects, particularly our historical division, giving us the responsibility to create a digital archives, as also write the history of Indian Army and many other projects which we would be doing in concert with RTRAC. I just want to assure General Raj Shukla that USI is your institution. Please bank on us, make use of us, and we will do you proud. And we look forward to your continued support, your guidance, and want to be benefited from your wisdom. General Shukla, today I can say with a profound sense of pride, is the most cerebral journal of the Indian Army. So, with these few words, I'll now hand over to Rana China, the Secretary of Center for Military History and Conflict Studies, to take us through the day's proceedings. Over to you, Rana.
Thank you very much, General Sharma, and a very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. And I would just like to second what General Sharma has said, and also to express my gratitude to the Army Commander, to General Shukla, for all his support and his encouragement. This particular project was undertaken under the aegis of the the Center for Military History and Conflict Studies. And we were particularly fortunate to have an author of the caliber of Major General A.J.S. Sandhu, himself a very distinguished gunner, who agreed to take this on. And it's quite a groundbreaking study, and I think it will serve the purpose that it was intended for very, very well. I will not take too much time. I will just initially, I just like to acquaint you with the form of the proceedings, and then I will introduce our chair, who actually may need no introduction, but still that's the format, so I shall do so. And then I will hand you over to the chair to conduct the rest of the proceedings. After I finish, the chairperson will make his remarks. That will be followed by the remarks of the chief guest, the Army Commander. And then the author, Major General A.J.S. Sandhu, will talk to us about the book. And this will be followed by a 10-minute question and answer session. As Shefali has mentioned, please, if you have any questions or any remarks, kindly enter them into the chat box, which is, the link is, the button is there on the right of the screen, and these will then be taken one by one by the chair. After the Q&A session, we will, the chair will make his concluding remarks, and I shall present my vote of thanks. Before I introduce the chair, I would just like to say that as a military historian, I've always found the artillery a subject of particular fascination. I mean, you know, when you read accounts of Indian military history, whether it's the Maratha gunners at the Battle of Laswari or the gunners of the Sikh army, the Sikh Darbar in the Battle of Ferusher, and particularly in 1857, you know, when the Indian artillery revolted against their accuracy was so good that the British were not willing to believe that the guns were not being served by Europeans. And as a result, ultimately, as you all are aware, after the uprising, all units of Indian artillery, field artillery, horse artillery, they were all disbanded, and the only artillery that was allowed to be retained by the Indian Army was small caliber mountain artillery guns. Till, of course, A Field Brigade is raised once again in 1935. So I'm particularly fascinated by the subject at hand. Our chair today is Major General Ian Cardozo, AVSM SM, and as I said, he needs no introduction. General Cardozo joined the JSW at Clementown in July 1954, and then from there, when the NDA came up at Karakwasla, he transferred there. He was the first cadet to win both the gold medal for Best All-Round Cadet and the silver medal for being first in order of merit. He was commissioned from the IMA into the 1st Battalion, 5th Gorkha Rifles Frontier Force. And from there, he was the first officer of the Indian Army to awarded the Shena Medal for Gallantry during a patrol in Nifa in 1960. He thereafter took part in the Sino-Indian War of 62, the Indo-Pak Wars of 65 and 71, where he was wounded during the Battle of Sylhet and overcame the disability of losing a leg. And he thereafter became the first disabled officer of the Indian Army to be approved for command of an infantry battalion and brigade, thereafter commanding an infantry division, and he retired from the appointment as Chief of Staff of a Corps in the Northeast. After his retirement, General Cardozo has been working in the area of disability with an NGO and subsequently as Vice President of the War Wounded Foundation, before he was picked up by the Government of India and appointed as Chairman of the Rehabilitation Council of India, where he worked for 9 years. And I know from personal fact, although that's not part of his CV, that he didn't take a penny for his services. He has taken up writing as a hobby, and his books are extremely well known and extremely readable. These include Paramveer, The Sinking of the INS Kukri, The Bravest of the Brave, and Indian VCs of World War I, an Indian Army in World War I, and a biography of General Bilimoria. And his latest book is a book on short stories of the Indian Army, which is under publication by Penguin. And he's also worked as an illustrator with an illustrator in over a series of graphic novels on courage, competence, and sacrifice of the Indian soldier, of which 10 have been published so far. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rana. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. General Raj Shukla, GOC&C Art Track, and chief guest for today's function, General Ravi Prasad, Director General Artillery, all Colonel Commandants of the Corps of Artillery, Chanas and friends. First of all, I want to state what a great occasion it is today for the Center of Military History and Conflict Studies to be releasing Major General Amarjit Singh Sandhu's book, With Honor and Glory, 5 Great Artillery Battles. I say that this is a special occasion because it is rare that we come across a book that spans the stories of battles that fought across 4 continents and are intrinsic to 6 countries. The common thread that weaves its way through all these stories is the great part played by the artillery in all these battles. I would like to say just a few words about these battles, words that General Amarjit may not have the time to say in the short time of 20 minutes given to him to talk about his book. The Battle of Bir Hakim, I'd just like to say this much, that it was here that General P.P. Kumaramangalam won his well-deserved DSO, not only for his part in the battle, but for the times he tried to escape from the POW camp. As we all know, he went on to become the chief of the Indian Army. The Battle of Vimy Ridge in France is a fascinating story where the Canadian Corps of 4 Canadian divisions won 4 Victoria Crosses in a battle of 4 days. 9 million rounds were fired in this greatest artillery battle in military history. The capture of Vimy Ridge was the first victory that turned the tide in the fortunes of the Allies against the Axis powers. The Battle of Gettysburg is the most talked about battle of the American Civil War It is this battle that reversed the fortunes of the Union Army against the Confederates, and the story of how this happened makes fascinating reading. The Battle of Chum, an iconic battle close to the heart of Major General Amarjit Singh, because it was his father, then Major General Jaswant Singh, in command of 10th Infantry Division, who faced the mighty barrage of Pakistan's artillery. More artillery guns were used in this battle than the entire artillery employed by Pakistan in the Eastern Theatre. Many lessons, I hope, will be learned from this battle. The Kargil War. In this war, Indian artillery guns fired till their barrels were red hot. It was the artillery that helped the Indian infantry to reverse the tide of battle at heights above 18,000 feet in the battles of Tiger Hill and Toroli. This book by General Amarjit Singh is a gem, not only for the student of military history, but also for all officers and civilians who want to know how wars are fought and what are the battle-winning factors, and that the power of the artillery gun is one of them. This very readable book is peppered with anecdotes which make the narrative very, very interesting. The sketches by the author helps the reader to more easily understand the flow of the battle. I commend this book not only to the Indian Army, but also to the armies of Canada, Britain, the United States, France, and also to the Army of Pakistan, which during World Wars I and II was part of undivided India. General Sandhu, with this book, has not only resurrected the honor and glory of the artillery, but also the honor and glory of the countries that took part in these memorable battles fought so many years ago. Before I hand you over to General Shukla, I would like to say a few words about our chief guest. I'm sure that General Raj Shukla must be tired listening to his CV being read out at various functions. And so I asked General Amarjit, better known as Abdo, what does the world think about our chief guest? General Amarjit said, "Sir, General Shukla has had a dream career that anyone would be envious of. Most of all, he is a thorough gentleman, and that is saying a lot. He has had a brilliant career in the Indian Army that few can rival. First on every course, he is also the recipient of the Silver Gun at the Artillery School at Divlali, which makes him top gun. He is an alumnus of the NDA, the IMA, the Defense College of Management, the Defense Services Staff College, and the National Defense College, Delhi. He has served in the most prestigious army institutions that include military operations and perspective planning. An aviator, he has commanded his brigade and division in J&K, and of course, a corps. He has been commander of the Higher Command Course, commandant of the War College, Mao, and done instructor's tenures in Staff College, School of RT, and Imtrak, Bhutan. What could anybody aspire more than this? Most important, as Abdo, that is General Amarjit Singh, has said, he is a thorough gentleman who has competed with himself and not with anybody else. In all this, his focus has always been military history. And what could be better than having a chief guest of this caliber? I hope all that I've said about General Shukla would motivate future generations of the Indian Army who are now listening to what is happening on the screen. About Major General Amarjit Singh, better known as Abdo to all in the Indian Army, his book speaks for himself. His attention to detail, verification of facts, and narration of military history in a most readable form makes him a special presence in the world of military history. General Shukla, over to you.
The Director General Artillery, General Ravi Prasad, Commandant School of Artillery, General Raj Kumar Sharma, the DG Financial Planning, General Tarun Chawla, fellow Colonel Commandants, GOC's Artillery Divisions, MG Artilleries of Commands, the Director USI, General BK Sharma, Chairperson, Center for Military History and Conflict Studies, General Ian Cardozo, Squadron Leader Chinna, members of the USI, officers at the Directorate General of Artillery, the wider gunner fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning, and thank you for the very kind words, General Cardozo, General Sandhu, my battery commander, CEO, one-time boss, and General Sharma. It gives me great pleasure to be here for the virtual book release of Major General AJS Sandhu, Abdo Sandhu as we fondly know him, his labor of love with honor and glory, 5 great artillery battles. I went through this book last evening, and it's really a riveting account of the dominant role of the artillery through 5 great battles, as General Sharma and General Cardozo told us. Ones that span continents and operational theaters and are also curiously set a century and a half apart in time. The first and the last of the chosen 5 battles being so separated chronologically. In coming to the choice of the battles, I was wondering as to why General Sandhu excluded the Russians, the Vietnamese, and the Israelis, who are equally brilliant exponents of firepower. But he must have his reasons, and we'll be glad to hear them. The accounts of these battles have been briefly given to you. Let me just run over them quickly. The Battle of Gettysburg in the US Civil War, whence the artillery was still a direct firing weapon, yet so overwhelming was its effect that General Sherman, then of the Union Army, later commanding general of the US Army, is quoted to have said that a battery of field artillery is worth 1,000 muskets. The Battle of Vimy Ridge, the Canadian Corps initiating operations in World War I with one of the greatest artillery barrages in history. The Battle of Beersheba, 2 Field Regiment SP, the regiment General Sandhu and I belong to, knocking out 56 tanks of Rommel's Africa Corps in a formidable display of precision green anti-tank firing. The Battle of Chum, where, as General Sandhu tells us, Pakistan amassed more artillery pieces to support battles in this sector than they deployed in the entirety of what was then known as East Pakistan. And finally, the battles of Tololing and Tiger Hill during the Kargil conflict in the summer of 1999. It was unique in the sense that it featured massed artillery delivering direct fires at very formidable heights, 16,000 feet and above. So 5 battles where not only was the role of the artillery overwhelming and its lethality devastating, but the impact of the cannonades and the operational outcomes often game-changing. The book is a fascinating read indeed, but the pleasure in releasing the book is profound for a number of other reasons as well. Way back in 83, 84, General Sandhu was my first battery commander when I was a young officer with the 2 Field Regiment SP at Jhansi in 31 Armored Division. My earliest memories of him are those of a thorough professional, a very committed soldier, a distinguished gunner, is also a perfect gentleman and a role model for many youngsters in those years. He was later my commanding officer, and our paths crossed on numerous occasions through our regimental and wider careers. And the attributes that I alluded to remained ingrained manifestly so through his active career in the army and beyond. So there is indeed a very strong regimental and personal connect, as also an association from which I benefited personally and greatly, a fact that I most gratefully acknowledge. It is indeed a very humbling moment for me today. Yet I do not plead guilty to any conflict of interest when I commend his books, writings, works to you. For over the years, General Sandhu has indeed emerged as a military historian of great standing and repute. And you have to just go through these books to know the value of his writings and the truth of what I say. Please do read his book on the Battle of Chum in 1971 too. I glanced through it yesterday. Arguably the bloodiest battle of the 71 conflict. And you shall find in his writings all the attributes of a very fine historian. Depth of research, mastery over facts, an eye for detail, a natural ease with the language, the ability to plumb the depths of events, to craft a weighty set of arguments, and the finesse to evolve a very distinct narrative. These are some of the virtues which come to mind and which I thought I must highlight. Ladies and gentlemen, I hail from Lucknow, जहाँ का अदब ये कहता है कि अपने से बड़ों की ज्यादा बड़ाई करना या तो चापलूसी या बदतमीजी मानी जाती है. Flattery or insolence, both unseemly virtues. So I shall terminate my praise of General Sandhu and his great initiatives in military history writing, merely commend the book to you, and honestly so, and hope that you get to savor its richness. He shall in any case be presenting his thoughts in the conceptualization and writing of the book during the course of his remarks. I keenly look forward to hearing. Let me use the remainder of my time instead to share with you the key facets of some other initiatives that the Indian Army and the RTRAC are undertaking in the domain of military history, the development, conception, and building of strategic thought in consonance with the directions of our Chief, General Naravne. One, we are looking at shifts in our conceptual approach to the study of military history in three principal ways: through our promotion exams, competitive exams, seminars, the curriculum in our CATEs. We wish to embrace an approach that is focused on the discovery of knowledge and enrichment of intellect as against mere committal to memory of facts, a trend that, in my view, has set in recently. We look forward to an approach that enables learning through secondary experience, and one that reinforces time-honored and tested institutional values and ethos. All three attributes, may I say, are hugely important. Two, we are also looking to Indianize the content. Now, what does this mean? Let me illustrate this by quoting examples from General Sandhu's book itself. Most gunners would know about the graced salience accorded to artillery by King Louis XIV of France. He described it as the last argument of kings. Or Joseph Stalin, who bespoke of it as the god of war. Even the combat exploits of Napoleon, one of the greatest captains of artillery. Fewer, however, would know how in the 18th and 19th centuries, as General Sandhu tells us, the great Maharaja Ranjit Singh, in his conquest of Afghanistan and Tibet, leveraged the artillery with perspicacity and skill, is also to telling effect. The war-fighting machine of General Ranjit featured a very evolved department of artillery with two distinct sections: Topkhana Kalan, siege guns, and Topkhana Khurd, field guns. He had set up artillery manufacturing plants at Amritsar, Lahore, and Kotli Lahora to give the science and industry of gunnery a fillip. Maharaja Ranjit Singh used artillery as a key plank in his expeditionary exploits. So illuminating our understanding of military history with homegrown Indian examples and perspectives is valuable and something that we must do even more vigorously. Sometimes it merely helps to reinforce a sense of worth, our self-esteem, and self-belief. Here is another example. So through our history, the many distortions notwithstanding, the instrument of force, in my view, has been pretty central to the practice of our statecraft. The more we investigate our culture and moorings and the content of our history, Indian history, the more apparent the reality becomes. Look at the clairvoyance of Chanakya when it comes to the positioning of instrument of force in our statecraft, his view. He says, Yadi Shastra, ancient texts, Yadi Shastra ko bhuloge to Sanskriti ko doge. You shall lose your culture. Or Yadi Shastra, weapon, instrument of force, Shastra ka tyag karoge to Rashtra hi ko doge. Could anything, anyone I ask, be more clear, even explicit? So we are considering now emulating the Chinese. We are doing it, in fact. Why should we rely on 36 stratagems of the Chinese, valuable as they may be? We are looking at compiling a unique set of stratagems rooted in a uniquely Indian strategic conception spread across the domains of statecraft, from war fighting to diplomacy, to combat, to intelligence, influencing, radiating soft power, etc., etc. Such is the richness of history, Indian history, and our own cultural moorings, and therefore they need to be studied oftener and in greater depth. We are also looking to introduce more contemporary campaigns in our study syllabi. The fascinating use of AI by the Israelis in the most recent Gaza offensive is a good example, artificial intelligence. Why should it be studied after 10 years and not in the more immediate future? In view of the rapidity of the evolution of the character of war, the greater the delay in grappling with historical events, the lesser the relevance and the utility. So we are looking at contemporizing our historical studies. In sum, we wish to promote an analytical tradition that links the past creatively with the present, while helping us identify pathways for the future with as much certitude as possible. We wish to lay equal emphasis on the high altitude perspectives that much of military history, or at least some of military history, provides, as also narratives that harbor perspicaciously at the eye level. Both are as critical: the long view and the bird-eye view, or the worm view. We have undertaken an ambitious, as General Sharma just recounted, but long overdue archiving project in concert with USI. Digital archiving of documents, photographs, and audiovisual material available across our regiments, battalions, and centers, propelled, of course, by a very robust search engine. We are also looking to create a website for a readable military history project, sans military academic jargon, to stir and sustain the interest of the lay reader and the combat enthusiast alike in the subject. We are more than willing to fund military history projects because they help us greatly in the evolution of our doctrines, operational philosophies, and tactics. So we are willing to fund military history projects proposed by our think tanks. Officers wishing to embark on historical research projects through the study leave mechanism are being encouraged. The response, unfortunately, is not that great. There is still time, and those of you who hear me and wish to go on study leave to undertake, studies of historical research, we will sanction that and we will back it thoroughly. We would be particularly delighted if younger officers embrace project studies in military history, campaigns, leaders, personas that shape the outcome of military events. There could be many subjects of value and interest. I have often wondered, for example, as to why we have no well-researched accounts of the mentorship and jugalbandi between two of our greatest military leaders, the military strategic genius of Sam Manekshaw and the sheer talent for war fighting of one of our greatest combat icons, Lieutenant General Sagat Singh. In passing, may I mention that those of you who haven't read General Randhir's book on General Sagat, A Talent for War, do read it. And their seminal contributions of the duo, not only in the creation of neo-geostrategic realities and now prosperous nations, Bangladesh, but also in our strategic rejuvenation against China, 1967 Nathula. Rigorous research, investigation, and documentation is an important aspect of strategic military studies. The Americans, for example, write extensive accounts of the civil-military relationship, CMR as they call it, associated with each presidency. So you have a CMR account of the Reagan years, you have a CMR account of the Obama years, you have a CMR account of the Kennedy years. And these documents give you valuable insights. They document in painstaking detail as to how decisions were arrived at, or at how critical decisions eluded us or eluded the Americans. Accounts that give you a sense of the broad direction of travel of particular administrations and carry in their womb very useful lessons for the theory and practice of national security. We may consider emulating this good tradition. A historical flair, in my view, is also the bedrock for strategic acumen. The greatest of futurologists have a deep understanding of the past and history. Yuval Harari, just look at the title of his book, A Brief History of Tomorrow. Lawrence Friedman's Strategy or History. It reinforces the fact that the past and the future are greatly linked. And unless you are a good student of the past, you cannot predict the future. Friedman's book, The Strategy of History, gives you a historical account of the perils and pitfalls in the prediction of futures. While Yuval Harari, his book, even as it documents as to how humankind came to rule the planet, he now blends science, history, and philosophy to tell us as to how humans may become superfluous in the future. So from ruling the planet to becoming superfluous in the future. In the military context, let me say that those well-versed with the travails of the past are destined to be soldiers with better strategic and operational wisdom and insights. So military history is a very valuable tool indeed for this profession, for the professional evolution of soldiery. It deserves all the support and encouragement at our institutional command. Here, may I add that while we have, and I was just comparing the other examples that I gave you of Yuval Harari, Lawrence Friedman, and the others, while we have many historians, shall we say, in the civil domain, Ramchandra Guha, Amish Tripathi, Sanjeev Sanyal, the ones of similar caliber in the military domain, those standards of excellence are far inferior. So General Sandhu's book, his entire initiatives in military history should be cause for some inspiration. Since we are at an event with USI, may I recount to you the example of General S.K. Sinha. I recall when I was Commander, High Command Wing, he was invited to speak, and I think just about 4 months before he passed away. And somebody at his age, I was amazed to see, firstly, he spoke from the rostrum. He spoke without a piece of paper and gave a historical account of events from the Kitchener-Curzon dispute, even further back to how evolved the High Defense Organization was under Chandragupta Maurya, to the Kitchener-Curzon dispute, to 65, 71, and the present state of our High Defense Organization and the challenges of national security, all without a piece of paper. That is something which is at least the youngsters should get inspired and aspire towards. Even I cannot, deliver a 10-minute address without a piece of paper. But this was General Sinha, and I saw him live. So let me leave you with these thoughts. Should any one of you have any new ideas, especially in the context of military history, we shall be glad to hear and explore them. If you wish to get in touch with me personally, kindly WhatsApp me at 8588842630. You can also reach RTRAC, which is now on Twitter, for deeper conversations on the subject. My warm congratulations to General Sandhu and the CM HCS yet again. It is a great pleasure to release the book. May I now request all of you to join me in releasing this book by General Sandhu. So congratulations again, sir, and thank you everybody for your patience and time. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, General Shukla. And may I now hand you over to General Amarjit Singh Sandhu for his comments on his book. Over to you, Abdul.
Yes or no?
Hello.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank, firstly, the USI, General Sharma and Squadron Leader China for organizing this virtual book release, and to General Ian Cardozo, one of our most famous and iconic generals of the Indian Army, for chairing this session. And of course, to Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, GOCNC Army Training Command, for kindly consenting to release it. It's a particular honor for me that General Raj Shukla is releasing it. He is the senior-most Colonel Commandant of the Indian Artillery, and he is also obviously the senior-most serving gunner. And like he said, both of us have served in the same regiment at one point of time, and coincidentally, a battle fought by that regiment forms part of this book. So thank you very much, sir. Now, coming to this book, the first point I'd like to make is, how did this project come about? This project was the brainchild of Lieutenant General P. Shankar, who was the DGRT, and his then deputy, Major General Srivastava, who later took over from him within months and became the next DGRT. Now, plan was to have an in-house project. They gave the task to some officers within the Regiment of Artillery. but whatever came out somehow did not meet their expectations, and then they approached the USI. Now the USI, I just finished my first book on chump, so they contacted me, and I readily agreed. It was an honor for me to be selected for that matter because I'm a gunner myself, and what better thing to do than write on gunner battles. But I quickly regretted my decision because when I started research, I found that whichever battle I picked up, there was very little written about the RT. A piece here, a sentence there, a paragraph there, but nothing of substance, not much at least. And I found that amazing because ever since the advent of the cannon, artillery has been a battle-winning factor in all operations. But anyway, I persisted, carried on, and initially it was to be 6 battles and it got reduced to 5. And I then shortlisted some and finally honed down to these 5. Now these 5 battles, just like was said before, they span a period of 136 years and were fought over 4 continents. And in a way, when you read these battles, you get an essence of how the artillery evolved over this period by reading just the artillery, the battles and the RT actions. And secondly, they were iconic battles in their own right at the time they were fought. So that is how I selected these. Now, I don't have much time. It's impossible to give much about any of these battles in 20 minutes, one single battle, leave alone 5. So what I will do is I'll just cover a sentence or 2 on the battle itself, and then some points pertaining to the RT. Of course, you can't cover everything. Now, the first is the Battle of Gettysburg. This battle was fought in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd July 1863, and it was a part of the US Civil War. Shifali, can we have that map, please? This was fought between the Confederate Army of North Virginia, led by General Robert Lee, against the Union Army of the Potomac, led by General George Meade. And quite interestingly, Gettysburg was never the intent for the battle to be fought by either side. It was a chance sighting of the lead elements of the Confederacy by the cavalry of the Union Army of the Potomac that made this into the battleground. And I've just put one map. There are many maps there, but I've just put one map just to show you the city and how many roads emanated, 10 roads to different points, to different cities. And along these roads are ridges, which you can't clearly see here, but you can see in the map, which became defense lines. Now, Robert Lee, he attacked it on 3 days, like I said. And on the first 2 days, he got the better of the Union Army, but he could not make a decisive breakthrough. On the 3rd and final day, he decided to put in all his might in the center with demonstration attacks on the sides, on the flanks. But a preemptive move by the opposite side, and therefore he had to change some plans, but he nonetheless went in for a huge attack in the center. He massed his troops under a man called General Pickett, of not only Pickett's division, but other divisions. And this is today known very well in the US military history as the famous Pickett's Charge. It was a massed group of troops. You can just imagine, they got up from their trenches and moved in parade ground fashion, literally, towards the center of the Union line against an onslaught of the Union artillery and of course, small arms. They kept moving. One by one they fell, but the line kept moving. And indeed, they actually reached the top also. But the attack petered off. The Union, the replacements didn't come, the reinforcements, sorry, and they had to pull back. And that was the end of this battle. And next day, they withdrew back to their own territory. Now, this in short is what happened here, but it's in great detail in the book. In every battle, I've first given the battle itself and then fit the RT operations. Now, coming to the RT. At this point of time, the RT was still a short-range weapon system, and therefore it was actually called, in USA, it was called the long arm of the army. So you could go, the maximum range you got was from the RT. And therefore it had to, because of the short range, it had to be deployed right in front along with the infantry, from where you could sight the weapons, the enemy weapons or the enemy targets. Now, this was one part. Secondly, what stands out is a mismatch of artillery strength from both sides. The Union arty had 370 pieces versus only 270 cannons of the Confederacy. And this affected their organization. So the Confederacy's lowest level was a battery, four gun battery. The other side had 6 guns. And up it went to battalions, brigades, and corps. Now, so therefore, the artillery allocation at each step in the Confederacy was less as compared to the Union Army. And this also manifested itself in another way, and that was the most crucial way actually, and that was in the creation of an uncommitted reserve. Confederates could not have it. The reserves were allotted to the corps. But the Union, they had 108 guns uncommitted under the Chief of Artillery, Brigadier General Hunt, which he used beautifully on the final day to change the course of the battle. And actually, if you look back and compare what today, what we have, it's something like an artillery division today. That is uncommitted force available to the corps commander or the army commander to be put at the point of decision. And that's exactly what this man did. And that changed the tide of the battle in a way. Now, 2 small points there I'll just make. One is that the battle is also famous, other than the Pickett's charge, by what's called the Great Cannonade. Pickett's charge was preceded by 90 minutes of a fuselage let loose by the Confederate artillery onto targets which they could see. The aim was to pulverize the defenses, and then the Pickett's forces went in. They did a lot of damage, but not sufficient. And therefore, the battle played out the way it was to, and it was a turning point of that war, of the Civil War. Other point I would like to make is that, when we advance, the infantry armor advances and the arty follows. In a curious turn of events, when Confederate army was advancing, their 3 corps was leading, 3rd Corps. And in 3rd Corps, the division which was leading was Heth's division. They had named the divisions of the divisional commanders. And guess who was leading the division? They didn't have cavalry. So it was led by an artillery battery. An arty battery, the Fredericksburg battery, led a divisional advance and was the first to fire the guns. And the last point, as an aside, the gallantry of a Union artillery lieutenant, First Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing, was recognized 151 years later. In 2013, President Barack Obama presented the highest gallantry award of the United States, the Congressional Medal of Honor, to his family. So I'll end on that. Go to the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Now, Battle of Vimy Ridge, as was brought out earlier, was the first time that the Canadian Army fought as a single entity. Now, before that, they had fought in various battles, but they were not as a cohesive whole. They were part of somebody else. Now, this Vimy Ridge battle was part of a wider Arras spring offensive of the Allied forces in April-May. The offensive was a failure, but the only success was the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Vimy was a 7-kilometer long, very high escarpment with formidable defenses. And to capture that was a feat in itself. And the kind of preparation that was done, I can't cover now. Tunnels were dug through which the infantry waited and came out. I don't know how many 100 kilometers of cable was laid. Millions of ammunition rounds were fired, as was said. And the most important thing was the mass of artillery of the corps, adjoining corps, armies which was deployed there. It was phenomenal. And the artillery there, the battle lasted just 4 days. And the artillery there played, I would say, a very, very dominant role in the final outcome. 2 procedures which stood out. One was the creeping barrage, which, though tried out in the Battle of Somme the year before, had not been that effective, and we had suffered many casualties. I mean, the own troops suffered casualties because of the way the barrage was being formulated then. That procedures were refined. The the steps that, I mean, the halts that they had to take in advance were practiced on ground by laying tapes and artillery fire simulated. And finally, the barrage that fired, I'll just come to that later, was phenomenal. The second thing was, second point I would like to bring out in the RT procedures was the counter bombardment. The flash spotting and the sound ranging were in the nascent stages. The counter bombardment officer who was nominated by the general corps commander was a man called Lieutenant Colonel Andrew McNaughton, who later became their chief and later still the defense minister, much after the war. This man, 3 years before, gentlemen, was a professor teaching physics in a university. Suddenly he was a lieutenant colonel in 3 years, and he refined these procedures to the extent that 1 century ago, they were able to locate guns to an accuracy of 10 meters. These two things played a key role. Now, the RT which was employed there was, other than the preparatory phase, was in 4 phases. Phase 1 started 3 weeks before the battle, 20th March to 1st of April. And for these 2 weeks, there was incessant pounding of the guns, the firing positions, the barbed wire entanglements, the reinforcements coming in, etc. The aim was to keep on harassing these people. Phase 2 was for 1 week, and this was 24/7 incessant pounding of their defenses. It was so severe, gentlemen, that it broke windows of towns 20 kilometers away. And the Germans who were at the receiving end had given it a German phrase, which I can't pronounce, but in English it meant the week of suffering. They were literally demoralized when the attack went in. That set the pace for the third phase of the RT, and that was the launching of the attack. And I will just use 1 sentence to tell you that it started at 0530 hours on 9th April, the attack. It was Easter Monday of 1917, and it started with a firing of 983 guns. That was the biggest barrage in history, at least till that point of time. So you can imagine, that many guns fired. So now that much about the RT, but just 2 other points. One is the Indian Connect. The Indian Connect, which is not known to us really, and I dug it out. I got it through by chance. That Lahore division of Indian Army had been sent to France during First World War. After a few months, it was sent off to Mesopotamia, where the bigger war was raging. But the artillery of Lahore, the Lahore division artillery remained back, and they supported this attack. And there is a painting which I put in my book, which shows Sikh gunners of this Lahore RT manning guns in support of the Mirage. The second point I would like to make, the last point, is that in acknowledgement of this decisive victory in France and for France in the World War, after the war, France gifted 250 acres of land to the Canadians. And this area of 250 acres really encompassed the battlefield of Vimy, which remains intact, including the tunnels and the barbed wire, etc. This is sovereign Canadian territory within France and is a memorial to the great fight put up by the Canadian Corps. Now I come to the Battle of Bir Hakeim. Now, the Battle of Bir Hakeim will go down in the annals of military history as the finest example of gun versus tank battle, in which the gun crews of 2 Indian Field Regiment, firing over open sights, knocked out 56 tanks of Rommel's Elite Africa Corps. Now, I have been a CO. Even I didn't know. I used to wonder why 56 out of 80 were knocked out by gunners. What was the cavalry doing? Unfortunately, the cavalry at that point of time had 2-pounders. They didn't have tanks. So they were pea shooters. So it was all 2 field. Now, what happened is 2 field had been raised just 2 years before, 2 Indian Field Regiment, as it was called then, in Bangalore. Next year, it was found fit for war and sailed in November of 1941. It reached Basra, and then for 6 months, it was moving in Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and finally it landed up in middle of May at on the Mediterranean coast at a place called Garavla. Can we have the next slide, Shafali? Shafali, next slide. Yeah. I just wanted to show you the situation on 15th of May. This was, back, please. Not this one. Yeah. In the middle of May, the Allied had been pushed back about a few months earlier, and they were holding what was called the Ghazala Bir Hakim line. Ghazala on the Mediterranean coast, and down the way, Bir Hakim. All these were strong points. An offensive by Rommel was expected. So there were strong points and box-like defenses. If you see Bir Hakim, that was occupied by the Free French Brigade. And then you go southeast, there is the 7 Motor Brigade. That is what it was there on 15th. But there was a gap between Bir Hakim and 7 Motor Brigade. And to plug that gap, 3 Indian Motor Brigade was moved from this area of Garavla, etc., and told to plug the gap by occupying point 171, which was really a hump, 5 kilometers from Bir Hakim. We call it the Battle of Bir Hakim, but it was fought at point 171. Now, next slide. So they arrived, the regiment arrived at Bir Hakim on 26th, only to face the brunt of the armor the very next morning. So they occupied a box like this. There was 18 cavalry, as you see, 2nd Lancers, 11 cavalry, and an anti-tank. No, anti-tank is not here. It was in a long range. There were the engineers in between. In between, you can see the 3 batteries, the way they were deployed. 7 field battery in support of 18 Cav, 3 field battery in support of 2nd Lancers, and 4 field battery in support of 11 Cav. This is the way they were deployed. Now, they reached in the afternoon of 26th. All night, they kept preparing the gun positions. Patrols were sent out, and they heard rumbling noises. The patrol was sent out by 2 field under Captain Frisby. And he reported rumbling noises. He went about 10-15 kilometers and said, there are tanks coming up. Nobody believed him. He passed the message to his battery commander, then Major Kumaramangalam, who passed it behind, but nobody bothered. They said, rubbish, it can't be. It must be our other patrol cars pushing back. So he was told to go further. This patrol of Captain Frisby, an OP officer, he went further, and he literally bumped into this leading column of Rommel's forces. He saw the light. The leading vehicle has a guiding light. He saw that, and he saw the badge of the formation sign of the Africa Corps. And then he told them, he rushed back and said, it is them. But it was too late. In any case, nothing could be done. So in the morning, at the crack of dawn, what was seen in front of 3 Indian Motor Brigade was a phalanx of armor and mechanized vehicles of the Africa Corps kicking up dust and coming towards them. When they came within indirect firing range, the first person to open fire was the OP officer of 2 field, and that was then Captain A.S. Naravne, who is the uncle of the present chief. That man opened fire. He had the distinction of firing the first rounds of gunfire from 2 field. Subsequently, other OPs opened up indirect fire. But that was for a short time, because by then they were within direct firing range. And what happened after that was utter mayhem. It was the tank crews against the gun crews, artillery gun crews of 2 field, firing 25 pounders against the armor vehicles and other mechanized vehicles of the Italians and Germans. Now, next slide, please. Rafali? Yeah. This is how the attack took place. Just see the red arrows. Who could stand a chance here? Nobody. So, and the battle was over. I won't tell you much about it because you read it. It was over in a matter of hours. But by then, 80 tanks had been knocked out and 56 by the 2 field. And then the brigade was told to withdraw to a place called Buck with whatever resources it could pull out. Out of the 3, a lot of prisoners were captured. I'll just show you the list later. Out of the armored corps of COs, 2 of the armored corps officers, it's a cavalry officer, sorry, they were called cavalry then, 2 COs of cavalry regiments and all 3 adjutants were captured. And along with hundreds of VCOs and OR. Later on, the OR, you will not believe it, 600 odd OR were released by them because they couldn't, by the Germans and Italians, because they couldn't feed them water. So they were sent back. The officers and the VCOs were retained, some of them. All officers and some VCOs. Now, Field, when it pulled back, it could pull back with only 7 guns out of 24. There were 8 gun batteries at a time. They pulled back with only 7 guns. And a few days later, General Kumaramangalam, along with the Lieutenant Clark of 18 Cavalry, returned to the battlefield and took back 9 more guns. And we became a 15-gun regiment till reinforcement came. Sadly, General Kumaramangalam, and he was given a DSO. Sadly, he, leading a column a few weeks after that, he got captured. He became prisoner of war. He escaped, only to be recaptured again. And in that camp were illustrious people like Yahya Khan and all that, big wigs. Can I have the next slide, please? Just to show you how many people, the officer casualties really. Look at this. This is the casualty list of 3 independent armored brigade, which kind courtesy an officer of mine, he sent me from the Royal Archives of London, the 3 independent motor brigade war diary. Second Lancers, lucky only 3 people. Of course, below you can see 8 other ranks, 109 others and wounded on the right, but 109 prisoners of war. Next comes 18 Cavalry, which is a lot of people. And you have Yaqub Khan. Then comes 11 Cavalry. And next slide, please. The next total, which is only 2 field, is more than this is 2 Indian Field Regiment, gentlemen. Just see this. 19 officers were captured, killed. That shows you the ferocity of the battle and the part played by the officers in leading those guns, standing behind those guns. And you will find in this, somewhere in the center, you'll find the name of Lieutenant Tika Khan, Lieutenant Kalyan Singh, Captain Naravane. Kumaramangalam's name is not in this because this is the list of people who were captured on 27th. So just to end on 2 interesting points, Kumaramangalam and Tika Khan, Major Kumaramangalam and second Lieutenant Tika Khan, Lieutenant Tika Khan became army chiefs, one of Pakistan and one of India, and we are the only regiment. 2 Indian Field Regiment is the only regiment to have produced 2 chiefs of opposite armies. Captain Naravane, he later became the DGRT, was called, those days the DGRT was called DRT. So he headed RT arm, and Lieutenant Kalyan Singh became the military secretary. And when I was commissioned, he was the MS at the time of my commissioning. And last point, which I forgot to mention, is that General Kumaramangalam was retired around 6th of June. On 26th and 27th May, he visited 2 field in Ambala and stayed with us for 2 nights. He wanted to be part of the Beer Hakim Day celebrations. I was present there. A photograph or 2 appears in the book. He presented his DSO to the regiment. He says it rightfully belongs here. After some time, after his retirement, General Candace took over and he says, you please represent it to the RT Museum. And rightfully, it today lies in the RAA Museum. So that ends the Battle of Beer Hakim, and I just come to the Battle of Sham. Sorry, I'm running late. Just take 2 minutes now. Now coming to the Battle of Sham. This is one place where they have attacked every single war, Pakistan. And the reason I'm just quickly showing this map is because just see where the GT road is very close to the border. So they have always apprehended that we could launch an offensive, and we actually were supposed to launch in 71. Marala headworks, slightly even closer, that is the feeder of the canal system of the entire Punjab of them. So that is one. Secondly, if you see a gap between the shaded portion on top and Chenab River, you find that the white portion, that is a funnel from which gives excellent this thing for the armored mechanized forces and armored tanks for Pakistan. That's why they've always tried to go through that funnel and attack Akhnur. In 65, they reached within 7 kilometers of Akhnur. Now, they wanted to replicate this in 71, and they amassed a huge force of 5 infantry brigades, 1 armored brigade with a squadron, and colossal artillery, which was mentioned earlier. Now, they were focused on this while the 10 infantry division plan went through a series of changes, 4 changes actually, 4 changes in task. The last one, which really had a profound effect on the battle, was just 2 days before, on first December night, when they were told to call off the offensive and get into defensive. They were still getting into defensive when the Pakistan attacked. Now, Pakistanis attacked and crossed the Manawartali 3 times. Each time they were pushed back. And when we were poised to launch a counter-attack, the ceasefire intervened. I'll leave it at that. Now, coming to the arty part of it. Next slide, please.
Abdul, you'll have to wind up.
Yes, sir. Just 3-4 minutes, sir. Next slide. This is the attack plan. Next one, Shafali. This gives, okay, this is one page. Give the next one. This is the second page. So if you add all this up, and this is from the Pakistani books, this is more than what was in Bangladesh. Now, in this, there were 2 things which stood out, and both really involved 216 Medium Regiment. One was the infantry brigade attack on them, which was a hand-to-hand fight, the only time it has ever happened in our history, of post-independence history. And the second thing which nobody knows, which I've quoted in the book, is that these very guns knocked out 4 Pakistani tanks which were trying to cross the Sukta Nala. And this is written in the Pakistani book. I have no time. It is right here on my left side. I could have quoted it, but there's no time for that. It is the only incident in 71 war when the Indian artillery knocked out tanks. I'll leave it at that. Next one, the last one. Just 2 minutes on the last one. Next, that is the Battle of Tololing and Tiger Hill. Shifali. Now, Kargil is too fresh in our mind, so we'll skip this. These were the intrusions. Next one. The next map really shows the Battle of Tololing. This was the feature. I'll only make a point that the company on the right, which actually captured the Tololing top, the company commander was killed when the Pakistanis launched their attacks, and the OP officer took over the company. This is a sterling act on the part of an OP officer taking over a company of 2 Rajarif and holding on. Next one. Coming to Tiger Hill, we all know what happened there. I will not narrate the battle. Suffice to say that this was a very tough one, very famous, and the only incident, what should I say, the case example of the highest gallantry awards going to both sides. Ours, Grenadier Yogendra Singh Yadav got the PVC, and their Captain Colonel Sher Khan got the Nishane-e-Haider. Now, on RT, just 2 points. One is that we had amassed such an artillery force there that after these artillery fire, there was no way the infantry could have not succeeded. Each fire plan was, each battalion attack was supported by 120 guns. And the second point I wish to make here is the direct fire. Now, we are used to firing direct fire in the plains against tanks and bunker busting, but firing direct in high altitudes was a different ball game, especially when you were firing from high altitudes of 9,000-10,000 feet where the gun positions were to altitudes of 16,000 and above where Tiger Hill was. So that was done in such a beautiful way that in this case, all these, every attack was supported by 6 guns, both the attacks. And these used to strike straight on the target. When you fire indirect, many of the guns miss the crest. So I'll end there. There was so much more to say, but obviously I can't. But I hope I've been able to give you a flavor of the 5 battles which are covered here and the role of the other. Thank you very much, sir, and sorry for overshooting.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
I'm sorry, I seem to have gone off the video. It is now the question and answer session. I would like to tell everybody who is listening that we are over short time. So kindly ask your question, and no need for giving comments or your own personal experiences. Just limit yourself to the question. Please start.
Okay,
May I
have
ask
the,
a dozen questions?
let the cavalry be the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Idea of it.
Your voice is cutting. Your voice is not clear.
Can you see
You
me?
can't be heard, sir.
Okay.
Can we go on to the
Doesn't
next question?
matter. You'll come. So,
Hello.
we've been discussing.
You can't hear, sir.
No comments, please. Please give your question.
Let uh,
Can you
Can we
hear
go
me?
to the next question, please? We can't. Kuldeep, you are inaudible.
Go to the next person, sir.
Next question, please.
May I, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, the army commander had asked, why did you choose these particular battles? And you missed out, for instance, the Russians, etc. When you were writing the book. What was your rationale in doing so?
Excellent question, Rana. Actually, my first choice was always a Russian battle because they, use it in mass. The sad part is as I tried actually to get material on the Russian battles, I couldn't get anything. I tried through friends, I tried through all kind of people, because their writings are all in Russian, and there was very little available in English. So therefore, there seems to be a. Can you hear me, Rana?
I can hear you, sir. Somebody's mic is on, sir. I think they are.
Kuldeep, can you put off the mic, please? Kuldeep, just put off your mic, please. Kuldeep, mute yourself. Kuldeep, mute yourself, please. Kuldeep, just mute yourself. I'm saying something. Okay, so Rana, to answer you, so there was basically, as far as the Russian thing is concerned, there was lack of material, which I couldn't, but I left that one battle for the next edition, which we discussed. Perhaps, if I get something, then that will be that. Now, other ones which I would like to say, absolutely, the army commander was spot on. Amongst the shortlisted ones which I had shortlisted, one of the battles he mentioned, Vietnam, was indeed the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Even General Pankaj Srivastava was very keen, the next DGRT, second DGRT during this project, that I should sort of try to write on that. But that material which was available to me, again, from all the sources that I tried, was not sufficient to bring out the role of the artillery in a form of a chapter. A small article of 4 pages, fine. 5 pages, fine. But to bring out, in depth how the RT played a key role there, that became a bit of a problem. So I couldn't do that either. But Dien Bien Phu was there, just to give you one example. Similarly, there were some other German battles which I had shortlisted. So in short, it was insufficient material for which I could not write on other battles, and I picked these. But also I would say, other than Russia, that Russian, if I could have added that one, the other 5 picks are spot on. These 5 would have remained anyway. It was the 6th battle, because each of these is of a different time period and conveys a lot about how the artillery was organized and functioned. And I think finally the selection of Second World War, where probably the Russians would have come in, the Battle of Bir Hakeim is easily the best. So that in short is the reason. Yeah, Vikram. Yeah, please.
General Sandhu, you mentioned that during your perusal of historical record, you found very paucity of information on artillery battles, despite being a battle-winning arm of the fighting formation. Now, why is it so historically?
Vikram, I can't really answer in great depth, but all I can say is perhaps the reason is that the focus is on the infantry mostly in the olden times, and later, of course, armor, because the focus comes on the way the battle itself was fought, in which they figure more, and rather than how everybody else fitted in. And that perhaps is the reason. Though I must admit one thing, that one battle where I got a fair amount of material, the single battle actually, was on Gettysburg. Other places, there's very little. Kargil, again, I was somewhat lucky because it's all due to the artillery directorate and the then DGRT Vinay Shankar, General Vinay Shankar, who commissioned a project by the late Gurmeet Kamal, a very good military historian. And he wrote a coffee table book, Blood, Guts and Tears. And that was about the artist. So, unless it's an artist specific, somebody writing, you tend to gloss over. And so that's the reason. But for the rest of the audience who's listening, let me just introduce Vikram. Vikramjit Singh's little piece appears in my book. He was, what should I say, on the site journalist at that time. And he saw many of the battles fought there, including there are photographs of him climbing this feature and that feature. So he's, even today he's a journalist, but he saw Kargil battles firsthand.
Sir, may I just say something? Jan Cardozo, sir?
Yes, go ahead, General Sharma.
PK Sharma.
Go ahead, General Sharma.
Yes, sir. Sir, from your in-depth analysis of artillery battles, could you kindly tell us what is that knowledge gap that still exists, which can very prominently highlight the role that artillery has played, particularly in post-independence era of our war fighting? And I would like to allude to two cases, say Kirni Nala encounter, and also the role artillery has played, be it Siachen Glacier or at the LOC, in achieving a moral ascendancy over Pakistan.
Rana, there seems to be a lot of echo. Can this be sorted out?
Could you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir.
Jan Sandhu, sir, could you hear me?
No, I couldn't get it.
And now, am I audible now?
Yeah, you are.
Yes, sir. My question is, since you've done in-depth research on role of artillery, particularly in post-independence era, what are those other gaps that you would like to cover in your research, and particularly the role of artillery at the LOC in achieving a moral ascendancy? For example, if you look at Kirni Nala encounter in Punch and many other duels that we have had where we were able to achieve a moral ascendancy, particularly in last 4 or 5 years, would you like to map some of these and bring it to public consciousness, sir?
Actually, General Sharma,
Could I intervene here? Could everybody, 1 second, could everybody unmute except those who are speaking? There's too much of echo. Unmute, please.
I hope we are muted.
We are not muted.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Abdul, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Now, General Sharma, you're absolutely right. I think there is so much, you use the word gaps, absolutely so. There is so much of contribution of the artillery. You said CHM Glacier, you said line of control. The problem is only one, and that is that, rather two problems. One is that not much gets recorded by the people who have been fighting there over the years. I was G1 Ops in 3 days at one point of time, and nobody had time to record that. And that was in the beginning of the session. I mean, it was third year of session, and those days we were suffering a lot of casualties, and them also casualties. But sadly, there was nobody recording all that. There are traps here and there, but which I hope exist. So firstly, the formations concerned don't record. That's one part. But even if they record, the biggest problem is nobody shares it. Nobody wants to pass it on to you. I must confess here that I was very lucky this time, including the first one, because I had the backup of the USI. Because of the backup of the USI, a fellowship from the USI really for the first book, I was able to get the war diaries from the people who fought in Cham, and therefore bring out that. And in this one, because not only was it a USI-backed project, in turn, it was artillery involved in it. So the RT Directorate was very kind to tell the units, send this man whatever he wants about Kargil and even on Cham, although I'd already written on that. So unless we are able to, unless people share their the way these things have been conducted, because a layman sitting elsewhere cannot, compile all that, what was happening over the last few years. And I totally agree with you. The artillery duels, till the ceasefire, I think 2004 or something, we brought in a ceasefire on the LOC. But otherwise, there were regular RT duels. In fact, some of our guns had, I was ADGA that time, and some of our guns had sort of got worn out. That is the kind of fire that was being done. So, but I think if now that Mr. Rajnath Singh has given some kind of thing that you can start declassifying, and I hope things will change, hopefully, and then we will be able to plug all these gaps, because RT is, I have selected 5 battles, there are so many more, like the army commander himself named so many. And then what is happening close, nobody even thinks of we think of battle of that and battle of that, but nobody goes to what is the everyday form feature on the LOC and things like that. So I think things may improve, and then we will be able to fill these gaps.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Can we take one more question?
There is a question which
Yes,
says,
sir?
sir, please comment on the role of artillery in IPKF operations. That's in the chat box.
I'll be honest, I really don't know much. And in any case, there was not much of a RT role there. I'll just give you one example. For example, 36 Div went from Sagar. The RT brigade was left behind. It was essentially a, what should I say, infantry type of an operation. It was against the, the IP, LTTE. So that was more. So if some RT unit went, I think some light regiment went maybe. So, but I honestly don't know. I didn't go into it because in itself, it could not have formed the chapter.
Okay. Should we take one more question, Rana?
Side Jain sir, it was 302 light regiment, sir.
Thank you. I thought as much. There was a light regiment. Thanks a lot.
So I think we can close the session now, sir. After your remarks, sir.
Okay. So what more needs to be said about this book? With honor and glory, 5 great artillery battles, and this momentous occasion as to what a great book has been released today and what a great launch this has been. General Amarjit has emerged as a military historian of repute with his verification of facts, his attention to detail, and the excellent narrative style that makes his books so readable and interesting.
And Gupta, just a chinna.
I would like to recommend this book for study by all officers of the army as part and for military readers, so that study of the past can fashion the future. Thank you, everybody, for listening. God bless you. Take care. Rana, closing your what were the thanks?
Thank you very much, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my great pleasure to close the session with a vote of thanks. And on behalf of the Director and the Council of the USI, I would first and foremost like to thank our chief guest, General Raj Shukla, the Army Commander, RTRAC, for having spared his very valuable time to be the chief guest at this session and offer us his very, very illuminating comments, which showcase not just his deep interest in military history, but also the depth of his knowledge. So thank you very much for that, sir. I'd also like to thank Major General Ian Cardozo, the chairman of the Board of Management of the Center for Military History and Conflict Studies, for having chaired this session. As always, it's a great honor and a privilege, sir, to have you amidst us. And of course, we wouldn't have been anywhere without the author. I would like to thank Major General Abdo Sandhu for being such an integral part of the center and its activities, and for all that you have done for military history, sir. And more power to your pen. And I do hope that we have an increasingly larger number of officers of your caliber who take to writing our Indian military history. That is, as the Army Commander pointed out, the crying need of the hour. We have too long we've relied on foreigners or foreign scholars to write our histories for us, and it's about time that we actually set about rectifying that. I would also like to thank the DGRT, Lieutenant General Ravi Prasad, the Commandant School of Artillery, Lieutenant General R.K. Sharma, Colonel Commandants of Artillery, the Regiment of Artillery Association, and the Artillery Directorate, in particular Lieutenant Generals Shankar and General Srivastav, who were instrumental in getting this project going, and of course, all officers and attendees who've been with us today. Thank you very much. It's been a great honor and a privilege. Thank you.
The Army Commander would like to say something.
Oh, yes,
I just want to make one point, and quite apart from the book, this is from the discussions that followed. Just to, set some thoughts going. And this is the point I wish to make is this, that, presently we are faced with a choice as to what direction should our firepower evolve in. And here, this is something that I want to say. There is this, this guts and glory stuff, which is extremely important, which will support the infantry and armor battles, so the general support army. But if you see global trends, firepower is evolving into a much higher domain. So for example, the Chinese, they have their artillery, but their rocket force is emerging as a strategic instrument. And this is where, history comes in. I said, how you connect the dots of history with the present and the future. So if you dip into the Western doctrinal thought streams, to me, it seems that you have the general support artillery and then you have air power. And air power is so evolved and so precise that you have, tank commanders in Gulf War II directly asking for air support. So F-35 straight to a tank commander. If you dip into the other histories, the Chinese, the Israelis, the Koreans, and the Vietnamese, and that's why history is important. They have taken firepower to this new high, not through the Air Force, but through evolved ground artillery. And I think that's the question that faces us today. Because if you see today, hypersonics, they combine speed, Mach 6, Mach 7, precisionary. You just can't react to it. And hypersonics of the future will be really the decisive enabler. And in terms of, what shall I say, traction, it is rivaling the Air Force. So the 2 points that I wish to make it is that if firepower in our context has to evolve, it has to grow beyond blood, guts and glory stuff, important as it is. And we have to see that, do we need to go into this higher domain? I just tell you how important this is by one example I was seeing on the YouTube. After the Americans struck General Soleimani, when the Iranians reacted with their missiles and based on commercial satellite imagery, you see the Americans in Al-Assad Air Base shuddering, and the 4-star theater commanders saying how helpless they were against missiles. Of course, they had the option of using air power, but when the strategic construct so denied that option to him, the Americans were vulnerable before long-range precise, long-range precision missiles. So the point that I wish to make is that what the doctrinal choice that we face today is how do we evolve higher power into this strategic domain by going for precisionary hypersonics, because that, in my view, is where the future of firepower lies. I just thought I'll leave this this thought with this wider audience. And if there are any ideas on this, we can engage at some point in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Rana, we can close now.
Right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now bring this meeting to a close. Thank you. Shafani.